Hello, I'm Kamyar Rezaie, and this is Minds of Commercial Real Estate, the show that takes you behind the scenes of the dynamic world of commercial real estate. As a commercial broker to high-profile clientele in Southern California, I've grown a deep passion for the real estate industry. And in this show, we'll be exploring all things commercial real estate through conversations with some of my close friends, colleagues, clients, and partners who share my passion for the business. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please remember to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and of course, leave comments with any questions or thoughts you may have about the show. I'd love to hear from you. Hello, thank you for joining us on the show. Today I have Dr. Negin Ghaffari with Montessori of Malibu joining us. Negin, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Ours as well. Please tell me a little bit about yourself.
I wear multiple hats in my life. I'm first and foremost the mother of two boys, and I have a doctorate in educational studies. I've been working in the field of education for, not to age myself too much, but well over 20 years. I started out my career working as a teacher in the public education system. And then I went on and did my master's and my PhD. While I was a PhD student, I started working as an educational consultant through an agency through the university that I was at. And I learned a lot about best practices and what makes a school tick, what makes a school be successful for all the stakeholders, from the children to the parents to the staff and administration. What are the best things that we can do to make it the most thriving, efficient, and effective environment? Once I became a mom, I found that in my field, with a doctorate in education, I would be required to work evenings, teaching at least 2 nights a week. And my husband's a physician, ICU doctor, who also works evenings. So the choice was stay in academia and other people raise my children, or find some other avenue of working in education. I'd always been drawn to early childhood education, specifically the Montessori method. And I thought that early childhood education was really revolutionary. It's where you really truly work with parents and children and young teachers. You can really make profound impacts on your immediate community. So I decided to leave academia and pursue the dream of opening my own private preschool, or Montessori preschool. And that's where the challenge started, of finding the right space that I felt drawn to, that I felt was a good space for having children in, that they could thrive both physically and emotionally, and an environment that teachers could thrive in as well, where you could have the physical space in the classrooms and outdoors, and also be able to get the permits from the either conditional use permit or by right in the communities that I was comfortable working in. So that is now 14 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
By the way, Negin is my sister-in-law. Let's explore the avenue when you were, looking for your first space, and just, what you faced, the hardships, what the stories.
So with preschools in the state of California, there are very specific regulations under community care licensing. You have certain requirements on how many square feet you need inside, how many square feet you need outside per child. And then unless it's the space is by right that you could do it commercially, then you need to acquire a conditional use permit. When I went into the industry, the space was very limited. There was a lot of competition for space, and most of where my agent was the agents I was trying to work with were taking me were inappropriate for the specific use. So I started to try to find an agent who specifically understood this industry. And I found an agent who worked specifically with schools. And so that put me in a state that I already was with someone who understood the permits and understood the processes thereof. That smoothed it out for me, but it was challenging. I was a young mom, and I was running around with a toddler and trying to find space. So every day that she would call me, we would be running around for hours from space to space. And the the day that she called me and she said to me, I have something, let's go now. And I remember like I was like in sweats, and I had just dropped off my my only child at that time at preschool. It was raining, and like my pants were long and they were like running on the ground, and I just had planned on dropping him off, coming back and going back home. And she's like, no, this is gonna go fast. We gotta go right now. So we went, and I remember when I walked into the environment, I immediately knew, and it was a mess at the time. I could see it. The vision was there that it could be. One of the biggest things for me was having a space that could give us a space for the kids to run, to be free, right? From the classrooms to the outdoors. I'd always envisioned that we would have a garden at the school that I would have, and that the plan that I've written was they would have a big organic garden. There would be beautiful orchard with trees, and the kids would have a grass area and a hardscape area, and well above and beyond what the state required. The state says 75 square feet per child outdoors, 35 square feet per child indoors. And I never have in my life thought minimums are what I want to live by. And it was a space that I was going to send my child to. And so I wanted it to be where I could see my son Cameron be and feel proud of this space and feel that I could bring this to my community and feel good about it. And that's when the school, kind of the birthing of the school occurred. Once we signed the lease for the beginning of April. And that's where the next challenge started. I started, and this is the first time I was going into business in my life, and coming from academia and educational background, I didn't know business. I mean, even like filling out the paperwork was daunting. It was heavy and it was cumbersome, and it would put me into panic attacks. Like, it was pages and pages of financial documents and HR documents, all the things you had to create. It felt like it was more than birthing my child. And I had a very difficult pregnancy, if you remember. Sure. So that's where dealing with the state and going through those hurdles, the state was on a backlog at that time, and months in of paying the rent and not getting a license. It was difficult. It was financially heavy, but I knew I had to push through. And I don't know if at this age, if 14 years later, I would be able to do it. At that time, it was just kind of like, go, right? And then I found that I was pregnant. So now I'm trying to go through this process with another baby on the way. And a husband who was working, as you know, your brother, incredibly long hours, overnight shifts, and there was a lot of sacrifice. There was a lot giving up a lot. I hadn't lived with my parents since I went to college. And we both moved in with my parents, with one child and another on the way, because we had to make that sacrifice for it to happen. And so we were putting in more than we were taking out for a very long time. But eventually we got there, and it was based on just creating a good environment, a product that was good, that I felt that was the best practices. We did focus on the right things: safety, security, the teachers who were educated, and there were career preschool teachers, creating a Montessori environment that was enriching and beautiful and child-centered, right? So that's how the school, and we call it MOMC, Montessori Malibu Canyon, came into existence. I didn't get my license until February, and that was a lot of time to wait. And I had people who wanted to come and were sitting and waiting, and it was just
10 months afterwards.
Yeah, and it was me and my son Cameron and a couple of teachers that you had to hire before your license came at that time. So I had teachers, and then a couple of my friends were like, you know what, license or not, let's just do this, right? But at all times we were considering it like a co-op at that time, and my friends whose children were there would come in and volunteer and take turns, so that there would always be another parent there, so we wouldn't be in any kind of violation. The license wasn't coming. And it was getting to the point that I thought maybe, at one point I remember talking to my husband and saying, maybe we should just move in here, because if we're not getting the license and we have a lease, so we're not going anywhere. So then I decided that I needed to advocate, and I started reaching out to everybody I could. And by some, I don't know, luck, on some PDF document, I found the direct phone number of the Lieutenant Governor. And I called and I said, listen, the state is promoting small business, and I've been sitting here for all these months waiting. I have all my ducks in a row. I have proof that I submitted everything from the Postal Service, and is this in a reasonable amount of time to wait? And he literally said, no, it's not a reasonable amount of time to wait. And there was a lot of complications of questions of what had happened, and I don't want to get into name calling anybody, but it was strange. My application had taken a detour for no apparent reason. But the next day they came, and we've passed with flying colors, and we were licensed and ready to go. And we had kids waiting to move forward. And, it took a couple of years to get out of the red, but we did that, and we created a family, and there's been years of parents and kids, and our first group of children are now in their senior year of high school.
It's beautiful.
So, yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, you went through all this hardship, and we made it successful. Then comes around March of 2020 and COVID hits. And
if we rewind from there is first Woolsey fire hit.
Correct.
Woolsey fire hit, and we thought for a couple of days, that we were actually, the school burned. There was reports that the area we were was burned down. So I went for 2 days thinking the school's gone. And that was really, really devastating. Like, I'm actually getting work. I'm thinking about how overwhelming that felt. Like, all this work and all this, everything just being poof, gone. And after 2 days, we found out, no, it was standing. But while it was standing, now we knew that we couldn't go in. There was profound smoke damage. We had to get out. So at that point, I started driving up and down Ventura Boulevard, trying to find space. I didn't know. I had no experience of how insurance works, what will be covered, what will be not. But what I did know is that I had a promise to the parents that we had to provide the care, because a lot of our parents are actually first responders, right? And we had parents who are teachers, we had parents who are firefighters, attorneys. I mean, they need us, they depend on us. And I remember at this time, as I'm looking for space, an agent from the insurance said, just close down and you'll get paid for the loss of income. And I thought, what happens to these kids? Like, what happens to these families? And that was not an acceptable thing for me. So I went and negotiated with 2 spaces. One was a dance gym next door to a kid's like a spectrum, like a gym that focuses on the needs of special needs children. And they were right next to each other. And typically those spaces are not used during the daytime. So I made a deal with them to rent both spaces so we could bring and open up and bring our kids there. So it was interesting because, as you know, we have a different aesthetic about what clean means. Right. And so I remember being there and I was like scrubbing every surface and being there and like holding our kids to sleep, because it was an environment that was scary to them, and they were 2 to 6 years old. It was overwhelming to the children. And I remember the lady who owned that gym, they're long gone, they closed it. But at one point she came and said, "How did you get this table so clean?" I'm like, elbow grease. I cleaned it. It was disgusting. But it was a challenge. We were there for a few weeks, and then we had to go in, and the insurance company required me to throw out our furniture. And it was all North American maple wood furniture. It was supposed to be literally lifetime furniture. So throwing out all of our furniture, painting, washing down walls, washing down our Montessori material is all wood. So trying to clean that or throw it out, and then the insurance company not compensating me for all that they said they would. So that was a financial hurdle, getting through it. And we lost some families who were scared to come back to the Canyon area after Woolsey. So that we made it through. And one of the most beautiful moments was one of the first families, actually the first family who signed up at the school. They showed up the day we were cleaning, and they came and helped wash the walls with us. And so when you connect with community in an authentic way, when as a business owner, you don't just go in and take and leave, but you engage that community and you work together and you create space that the families have ownership and the teachers the same, like or your employees, whoever they are, you really create space that people feel like they have a stake, right? And it's a real stake. This family had been long gone from the school, but they came back to help without any requests in it. And so that's, I think, the key is for me is creating an environment where people wanted to be there and felt that they're connected to the school. We came out of Woolsey and we were doing great, and then sadly, across the street from us, Kobe's helicopter crashed. And that seems like it wouldn't be relevant to us, but it ended up being a real big deal for our school community. We had a lot of little boys and girls who were very connected and understood what had happened. And so watching for weeks the helicopters go piece by piece over us, taking the pieces. And, we didn't just disengage and say it's not a big deal. We really took it seriously of really hearing what our clientele were saying, that their kids were affected, they were impacted, and this was traumatic for them. And really engaging them in that and bringing our community together to help the kids heal from what was happening. And our staff, it was a big deal for our community. I mean, Kobe and the others who've passed on that crash impacted the world, but for our little micro community, it was a big deal because we watched it happen. And then we were dealing with paparazzi and coming into our space, and so that was a lot. And we're like, okay, we made it through this too, we're okay. And then COVID hit. And COVID, as you were asking and I interrupted you, COVID was a whole new world for us, because like a lot of businesses, we couldn't just close and move on. That was heavy. It was first, we were obviously scared, and we heeded and listened, and we closed. And we immediately shifted. I mean, we created all kinds of baskets and packages to send home. We shifted and became an online learning program. And our teachers shifted and started doing all kinds of different, we opened a YouTube channel. We had daily Zoom classes, and we worked together as a team and a community. And some parents just withdrew, and I respect that. And some people were very difficult. They immediately came at us about tuition, and whereas none of the private schools that I know, even the bigger private schools, didn't reimburse people for tuition that was paid up front. We actually did. But some of the clients got kind of ugly, and that was hurtful. And I know in business we're not supposed to think that way, but we consider ourselves a community, and so the impact was a lot. But the next part of that was figuring out how to survive, how to keep these jobs, how for the teachers, how to apply for the different aids that the government was providing. For me, someone who is not a business person and is not an accounting person, a numbers person, it was profound. First, I have a spouse who was working in a hospital. So the stress of that on a daily basis was overwhelming. We were literally afraid that we had COVID at all times. We stopped communicating with anyone, physically. We wouldn't, as you know, we didn't see anybody. We didn't go anywhere. We weren't afraid of getting COVID from other people. We had to assume we had COVID because my husband works in a hospital. And so we didn't want to be the reason anyone got COVID. And that was a lot. It was a lot on my kids. It was a lot on us. But then there was figuring out, how do you apply for this thing? And what is this thing? Am I eligible for this thing? Am I eligible for that thing? And then the crashing, you would go through the application and it would crash. I remember just sitting at by a printer on the ground one day, just crying. It's a lot, right?
Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the beginning, they did those, the EIDL loans and the PPP loans. And then, unfortunately, with the bigger retail banks, if you were a smaller fish in a big pond, they didn't really take your application serious. They were doing more of the people who had more of the funds in their account at those banks. Yeah. Where you had to, get other legislations involved to say, okay, what's going on? How come they're not helping us? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a challenge. It was a challenge getting the applications in, getting all the documents in, getting them to respond, calling, getting just enough to keep one more payroll. And then my landlord actually raised the rent. They did the regular raising of the rent, while another tenant of theirs kind of just disappeared in the middle of the night. And this was a very financially comfortable individual who rented another space from the same entity, and we paid our rent. No matter what we pay. I paid the teachers. I fulfilled all of my commitments. I know our city was giving out some small grants, and I was told, "Oh, you're not eligible because you're not brick and mortar." And then to find out that another entity that does the exact same thing was and received the full amount. And I'm sitting here providing literally an essential service for essential workers, and people with far less essential businesses were getting these grants. And again, I was in survival mode, and I wasn't going to take no. I, again, came forward and I said, hey, this isn't ethical. This isn't right. And so I ended up getting a smaller percentage because they ran out of money, and I didn't want to cause too many ripples, but I mean, it was not cool. And with my PPP, I ended up having to find actually through your referral, I found an advocate who advocate who worked with, I don't even know who she was, but it was an advocate that was referred by the person you referred me to ask what to do. That person reached out to someone, because you would call, you'd be on the phone like 2-3 hours easily, and that's okay, but it would just hang up on you, and you're like, oh, this is demoralizing, let's start again. So, but you can't give up, because if I gave up, that means not only I lose my business, there are people who lose their jobs, and there are people who lose their jobs in effect because they don't have childcare. And it wasn't a time that someone could just go, oh, I'm going to find a new preschool and take my kid there. So it was a lot. It was a lot. And honestly, for me, even like applying later for the forgiveness was a lot. It's all of it. And some of it I didn't get. I haven't told you. I didn't get because I didn't do it right. And I had some restructuring that happened in my business during that time. And, so all of it was like daunting. But eventually it's just having the patience of forgiving yourself, giving yourself grace, being able and willing to ask for help, being able and willing to say, humbling myself and say, hey, this is a lot. I don't know how. I need help. This is too much for me. And forgiving my body for giving up on me, because COVID emotionally, physically, like the restrictive on your mental state, it was all so much. But the one thing for me was that we had parents at the school who were wonderful. They were amazing, understanding, kind, compassionate, grateful that we were open and shifting. I mean, there was points that we couldn't find cleaning supplies. I mean, we were literally scouring everywhere to find cleaning supplies. We were trying to keep the place clean to not have anyone get COVID, but it was complicated. They said to us, oh, you need to move everything outside. Okay, so we're going to take these 2 to 6 year olds outside. So now we had to buy furniture to be outside. And everybody's getting dirty. They're covered in dirt from head to toe. So now we have to go spend thousands of dollars in half an acre of turf, because what are you going to do? You have to create the space. So I think for me, the key was evolving, not being rigid, being willing to say, what can I do to survive? Who do I need to ask for help for and who can I help? Also, right? Whether if it was a teacher who needed extra money and we had none, but we had the help, so we did personally. Or if it was a family who didn't have enough money to be able to send the child to school, so we had to, okay, what do you need to be able to come, right? Because you knew they needed to work, but they were making less money, and it was all cyclical, and we had to come together as a community to make it work, right? So it's kind of, and now we have made it through COVID, and now we have a whole new realm that we're dealing with, as the state of California has become our biggest competitor, because they now offer free universal preschool for up to, I think, 3.5-year-olds. So where our bread and butter was, of where we made our profits, was our oldest group of 3.5 to 4.5-year-olds. we're competing with a public education that's free. It's funny because I'm very socially progressive, politically progressive in social areas. And so I don't have a qualm with the service, but it would be nice if they considered this industry and gave some kind of vouchers for people who needed a different thing from the public schools to be able to come to the private programs. And the Montessori system program, pedagogy specifically, caters to specific types of kids and helps them succeed. And that's what it was created for by Maria Montessori. And it's not what the public education system in California is doing, at least. And so it's challenging. We are now in another space of pivot. We went from years of operating with minimal to no advertising, just word of mouth with a wait list, to we're not full. And it's humbling. It's a little scary. But we have to pivot again. We have to figure out, what do we do to be able to get a part of that market share, right? And so whereas I was looking very actively for a second space, I've just kind of backed away from that. And I'm like, okay, I have to make sure this school not only survives, but thrives. The community thrives as a whole, that we create and we continue to co-create and evolve, right? When I started the school, I came from the old school training of bright colors in the classrooms, and these are going to stimulate the children, and having the humility to, over time, not say, well, I have a doctorate and so I know more than you. No, saying, when a young teacher came to me and showed me a picture and said, I really want to do this to my classroom. And being able to say, okay, what can I do to make it work for you? And tell me more about it. Let's work together about why you want this. And it makes sense. When it makes sense, be able to, from a young associate in your business, from someone you bring in to work with you, respect them and hear them, be able to pivot. So I'm in that new stage right now of saying, how do we pivot? And I've had teachers come to me. One came and said, what about we offer afternoon only preschool, right? Maybe some people are not morning people at all and they're never going to get here in the morning. What if we provide that as a service? Well, that's a great idea. Let's think about that as an offering for next year. Or do we offer a language immersion program? But what else can we do with this physical space that we have? We have 2 acres of land. We have 8,000 square feet of indoor space. What else can we do with it to make it work for us real estate wise, right? So that's kind of where I find myself right now in business, at another kind of fork in the road.
But hopefully you're going to survive this and you're going to thrive. And,
I hope so.
Definitely. Well, thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate all the great information. And
thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, share any questions or comments in the comments below, and follow us on social media. I look forward to seeing you next time.